In this video lesson, we are going to explore provisioning and deploying relational database services in Azure. Obviously, we are going to focus on Azure SQL Database in this case, and we will see that how we can provision and deploy it. We will focus on provisioning relational data services. Then we will focus on configuring relational data services, in which we will see that what kind of IP configuration, user and security configurations are required in that. While connecting to this data service, which is hosted on Azure, and while connecting to this Azure hosted data service from your on-premise computer or from any other outside computer, what kind of connectivity issues can be there, what kind of client IP configuration or firewall configuration are required in case of data security. We will focus on all this thing in this video. Configuring relational data on Azure is a step-by-step process. And when you're going to use a tool like Azure Portal, and then if you are going to deploy or provision your Azure SQL Server or any other data service, you have to follow certain steps. Initially, every provisioning is going to start with the basic tab, in which you're going to focus on your subscription and resource group, in which subscription and resource group you want to create it. Then you can choose whether you want to go with the managed instance, and then you have to provide your SQL Server name, database name. You have to provide your SQL Server admin credentials with the login name and password. And you also have to decide which kind of region you're going to select, because there are more than 65 plus regions available in Azure Cloud. In which geographical region you want to create your data service, that you have to select in that. You can also choose what kind of compute you want to associate with your database. You can opt in for the elastic pool, or maybe you can just create a single database with the dedicated compute and storage associated with that. Once you're done with the basic, you can have a configuration of networking connectivity, where you can go with the public or private network access. You can choose your firewall rules for the the incoming request coming from any outside computer to the Azure cloud-based database. And you can also choose your own private virtual network configuration in that, with your own range of IP addresses, which will be also private IPs. Then you can go for an additional database configurations, where you can choose whether what kind of collation you're looking for or what kind of data source you want to associate with that. There are chances you have existing database backup, and then you want to directly load that database backup into this newly provisioned database. We can surely go with that. You can also focus on your database and server collation. You can also focus on your time zone, which is associated with that. And optionally, you can just opt in into advanced data security, which can be automatically taken care by Azure. After this three basically configuration, you can go for the tags. Now, we'll not focus on the tags much right now, but tags are useful for the naming convention. So when you want to find out any resources on Azure with the proper tags like client name or some kind of a regional name kind of thing, then this tags will be helping you to organize that. It is also going to help you at the end of the month when you want a consolidated billing with that. So that is something which is tags, but we'll not use it much in this course. And last but most important one, which is review plus create. And this is going to be that page which is going to be the final stage of your provisioning, where before submitting the deployment to the server, you can check whether the configuration which you have done in the previous steps are correct or not. You will also get some estimated cost on most of the services, so that before deploying that, you can get to know what exactly you will be charged at the end of the month if you continuously run it for 30 days. After that basic configuration, you also need to focus on connectivity from within Azure. Now, when you have application and other databases deployed on Azure, how those applications can connect to your database. Maybe they can directly connect and they can do send and receive request kind of operations with that. Or maybe they can connect via some kind of a traffic manager or application gateway. All the options and possibilities are available in Azure. So there are chances that you can do policy of redirect, where an application is going to establish a connection to the Azure SQL database through the gateway. All requests after the first will go directly to the database. So it's like first time is going to go to the gateway. It will maybe do some additional configuration with that. and then second time onwards, all the subsequent requests will directly go to the database. If connectivity to the database fails, the application will have to reconnect through the gateway. So suppose if it is not connected or some failures are happening consecutively, then you can go through the gateway once again for the authentication, and then after that you can again subsequent request will be redirected directly. The application may be directed to a different copy of the database running on the server in the cluster. So there are chances that you have enabled local or geographical replications on your database. And if one of the database is not available, it can go to the copy of the database which is running on this another server in the cluster actually. So it's like you're going to have a multiple servers inside one clustered environment where your database copies are going to be replicated. How this is going to work, we will see this thing when we actually deploy a SQL Server database today, exactly after this in the demo of this particular video. Obviously, with this, we also have to take care of connectivity from outside to Azure. There are chances that you have applications running on your on-premise server, or maybe you have SQL Server Management Studio or some other development machines which are going to connect with your databases. When this kind of scenario is there, let's say you have an application which is establishing a connection to an Azure SQL database via gateway first time. All the requests will go through the gateway in this case, whether you are making a first request or whether you're making some other request after that, everything will go via gateway. Why this? Well, because of the security of the Azure. Every time when the request is coming outside the Azure, you have to go through the gateway so that it can make sure that only the valid requests are going to be allowed for the database connection. The application may be redirected to a different copy of the database running on another server. Now this is again done here because of the high availability scenario, because we want to make sure that multiple copies of the database are going to be available. Also, there are chances sometimes we do this thing for resiliency, because there are people who are trying to access my database and application from different geographical locations. If I have geographical replications, then accordingly the data will be provided from different locations altogether in that. Next, we have to focus on authentication and access control. As I said, we have a gateways via which we can just focus on inside Azure or outside Azure kind of connections. But then we also have something called mixed mode authentication, which is allowing you to do SQL Server authentication plus some network level integration with the database, some server level principle and configurations can be done with that. You can also configure a Windows authentication kind of thing, but for that you need to associate with your Azure Active Directory authentication. So you can have an Azure Active Directory administrations, you can have your SQL Server or Azure users who can directly log in and connect to your SQL Server databases. And you can also control something which is known as role-based access control, where you can actually control that which user is going to have a roles assigned which can manage the database, which can just read the database properties and execute some queries on that. You can also have a configuration of Azure SQL Database Admin, where you can just use a SQL admin, you can use your login manager, database manager, you can provide your username and password and just log in into the SQL Server within the Azure SQL Database itself. And you can manage multiple users and security like you do with the traditional SQL Server. You can do all this authentication and access control inside the Azure. When you have integrated with Azure Active Directory, when you have multiple roles and the users who are going to use and associate with your database, then you can use this utility called RBAC, formerly known as Role-Based Access Control. It helps you to manage who has access to your Azure resources. Remember, this is not only for SQL database. Role-based access control is actually available for almost all the resources available on Azure. And you can also control what they can do with those resources based on the different roles customization which you can do. If you have to create a customized role, that provisioning is also available in Azure. You can control the access to resources using role assignment, and role assignments can contain 3 elements actually. You can have your user with the proper role and a scope associated with that, or you can have a service principal, which is something like a security principal, which is nothing but an object that represents a user or a service that is requesting to access the resource, because sometimes there are chances that you have a user who's going to connect to your database, and then he can maybe execute some queries or create some table structure with the queries. Or maybe it's not a user, you just have an application which is willing to access the data from that database. And that's where the security principles are going to come, because it can be either user or service to whom we need to identify, and then we need to provide an access of the database. Last but not the least, you also need to understand the replicas which can be configured with the Azure data services. You can have multiple read replicas which can help you to improve performance of your database. It can also help you to scale, and when you have a read intensive workload, like you want to do millions of data read access actually, and you want to display it somewhere in the Power BI or some other analytical platforms, then this kind of multiple replicas are going to be useful. It can be locally replicated. It can be also geographically replicated. Like you can see in this diagram, we have one primary copy of the database, and then if we want, we can create multiple secondary copies of the databases, which will be just read-only. So you can use these copies for read-only kind of data, where you can display the different analytics and different kind of query operations for read operations can be happen into this secondary databases. You can also create a replica in a different Azure region from the primary, which is going to give you an additional advantage of disaster recovery, where one replica is going to replace the other one. So if suppose your primary replica is actually down, then automatically one of the read replica, which is in the nearest region, will become the primary, and then you can get rid of your disaster actually. So it's a kind of a disaster recovery plan or failover management plan kind of thing, which can be also associated with this read replica. This will be that additional advantage which you are getting, because you are using not a normal traditional database, but you are using a cloud-based Azure database, and that's why all these additional advantages you're getting in this. Hey guys, sorry for interruption. My name is Maruti and I'm here to make a very important announcement. I hope you are liking our videos and you're doing a continuous learning with us on an Azure cloud and AI related topics. If you are enjoying this thing, I'm going to announce skilltech.club, which is our upcoming website, which is going to be launched very soon. We are here to tell you one thing, that everyone who is a subscriber of this particular channel will get Azure Cloud and Azure AI related certification courses free of cost in skilltech.club. So you will be a part of the skilltech.club kind of a membership automatically free of cost. And everyone who's a subscriber of this particular channel will get those benefits which are available in that. So what are you waiting for? I request you to please subscribe to this channel and share it with your friends and families if they are also interested in Azure Cloud and AI learning. That's it from my side. Now you can carry on with your learning. Thank you. Now, obviously, after all this discussion, we have to see that what kind of provisioning we can do inside Azure. And now it's the time to let's have a quick demo where we are going to provision our Azure SQL Server database as a platform as a service, and we'll focus on all these points which we have discussed in this particular lesson. Okay, so I have logged into this website, which is portal.azure.com, which is actually Azure portal. This is nothing but that particular website which allows you to create all the resources on Azure Cloud. Obviously, if you have a valid subscription, then only you'll be able to access this website, and then only you'll be able to create any resources inside this. I am on the home page of this website and I clicked on this button called Create a Resource, which shows me that I can create different kind of resources. I can create a virtual machine with Windows or Linux kind of operating systems. I can create an application or database or any other services which are available on Azure. In this left side categories, I'm going to click on databases, and then whatever database options which we have discussed so far, we are able to see that thing, like we have Azure SQL Managed Instance, we have Azure SQL Database, we have Azure Database for PostgreSQL or even for MySQL. Any of this I can provision right now on the cloud if I have a valid subscription, and obviously in that subscription if I have enough Azure credits available. I hope before proceeding further, you guys have already activated your free subscription with Azure $200 credit available in that, and then those credits will be useful when you deploy any services in Azure like Azure databases. I am going to select Azure SQL Database right now, and then it will take me to a page where I have to provide a configuration for basic, networking tab, security tab, tags, and additional settings. So this is same which we have discussed in this particular lesson. Now inside the basic, they're asking me which subscription you want to use for that. I'm using my Visual Studio Enterprise subscription, which I got with my Visual Studio. Which resource group I want to create. Now resource group is just like a logical grouping. It's like a logical folder name inside which you can keep your database and SQL Server. I am providing a name of this particular resource group, like this is going to be my DP-900RG. This is a resource group which I'm going to use for this particular course. And then what will be my database name? Let's say I'm giving a name of the database is going to be my name DB. I'm giving something like MariaDB. It can be anything. And then I have to provide a SQL Server. As you can see in this drop down, I already have some existing SQL Server which I have deployed earlier in the East US region of Azure. But let's say I want to create a new SQL Server now. So I'm going to click on Create New, which takes me to another page where I have to provide my server name and the credentials for the SQL authentication. I am going to provide a server name, like this is my DP-900 SVR, and I just want to make sure that this server name should be available. Yes, it is available there. While creating this for your demo purpose, I request you to change this name to something else if this particular name is not available, because it has to be associated with a unique name. Even in my case, when I have to create a server, just make sure that this is going to be unique. I am going to put my name before that. So this is going to be Maruti DP-900 SVR. The location for this I can choose from whatever available regions are there. I'm going to keep it in East US just for no reason right now. Maybe my customer base is located in this region, so I'm choosing East US region here. What kind of authentication I want? Now, as we discussed, we can use SQL authentication, and we can just go on with SQL Server admin password and all. And then if I do not want that, I can go for only Azure Active Directory based authentication, where I have to associate my Azure Active Directory admin here. Or maybe I can go with both. I can select Azure Active Directory admin and I want SQL Server admin also. So later on I can use any one of the options to log in into my SQL Server and validate the user based on that. As of now, I'm going with the first option, which is use a SQL authentication only. So let me just take that. In the server details, I'm going to provide some username and password, which I can use later on when I want to connect to this SQL Server, and then I can execute my queries after that. Providing some username password, going to click on OK, which will take me to the previous page in the basic tab, where you can see right now I'm still in the basic tab. My new server configuration is just configured here, but it's still not deployed because I have to complete the configuration process and then I have to deploy it. What kind of a compute and storage size I want, that I can choose here. Or maybe I can go with the elastic pool. If I set yes, I can have one elastic pool inside which multiple databases can be there, which will have a shared resources, as we have discussed. I'm going to click on this configure database link, and I do not want to go with the general purpose database because cost wise is going to be a little bit more expensive to me. I am going to select a very simple basic database, which is going to give me a 2 GB database with a limited data transactional unit, which is like 5 DTU, means like per second we can do 5 transactions on this database right now. And we are okay with this because this is something which is a very cheaper database. I'm going to click on apply, and then they are asking me that what kind of backup storage redundancy you want. Remember, this is not a data replication. This is something which is just a backup replication they are asking me. So where exactly I want to keep my database backup? Well, I want to keep it in the local redundant backup storage. So within the same data center region of this particular East US, they are going to create multiple backup copies so that if something goes wrong with the one of the copy, like maybe disk failure is happening or something like that, I can get the data from the backup. I'm going to click on next, and the second tab is asking me what kind of networking I want. I can choose my kind of network connectivity, which can be public or private. If I select private, I'm going to have my own private endpoints configured here. I can also configure my connection policies. I can also configure my redirect policies, and then I can decide how applications within Azure or outside Azure can connect with this. Or alternatively, I can go with the public endpoint with the firewall rules configuration, and I can decide that who can access this server and from where. Like the moment I select public endpoint, we have two options which we need to select here. They're asking me that do you want that other Azure services which are deployed on Azure obviously can access this server? I'm saying yes. And then they're asking me that do you want to add the current client's IP address? Now I'm using right now from my computer and I'm accessing this portal from that computer. So the IP address of that computer will be added into this particular firewall of this SQL database. Yes, this firewall is also going to be automatically deployed and configured with this database, and it will have the IP address of my computer so that I can assure that my computer is a valid computer to access this database server. I'm going to say yes for this also, and then I think I do not want to change any encrypted connections or connection policies for this. We are going with the default policy right now, and then we'll click on next. If I want some additional security, which can be maybe I want to associate some cryptographic integrity with this using the ledger, or maybe I want to associate some additional user-defined identity which will be managed with the Azure, then I can do that thing. Or I can also additionally specify transparent data encryption with my own service managed key. So I can configure all this additional configuration for security, but as of now I'm not doing it. In the additional setting, they're asking me whether I want an empty database or I want some database which will be having some kind of existing backup associated with that, or I want to use a sample database provided by AdventureWorks. I can choose any of these options. I'm keeping it none right now with the default collation given here in the for database collation. So I'm going to keep it none. So it is going to be an empty database. Later on, if I want to create some tables, I want to execute some queries, we're going to see how we can do this thing in the next lesson actually. So I'm keeping it none. I do not want to do any changes in tags, and quickly we'll just go to the last tab, which is review plus create. This review plus create is going to show you all what you have configured there. With on the top is showing you the estimated cost for this database and SQL Server is going to be almost 360 Indian rupees. Now maybe you will get the cost in your own currency based on your country's location, and according to that you can get to know that how much you have to pay at the end of the month if you run this service for continuously 30 days. Now obviously if I delete this database and SQL Server before 30 days, maybe after a few hours also I can delete it, and then it won't charge me for 1 month. Remember, all the Azure services are going to charge you on pay-as-you-go basis, so it's like whatever resources you are using and running it for a couple of hours, you have to pay only for that amount. So it's not going to charge me for 1 month. It's just an estimation of the cost which they are showing me here. If you're okay with this, you can just click on create, which will start provisioning this thing. So you can see the moment you click on create, that will validate this thing one final time, and then this will initialize the deployment first, and then it's going to submit the deployment to Azure Cloud. This is a point where Azure is going to take all your configuration, and then it's going to start deployment of this particular SQL Server with one database with all the security and compute configuration which you have defined. This process will take around 2 to 5 minutes, and then at the end of the process you will get a message here that deployment is completed. And then if that is completed, then you can just use the database, you can just configure it, you can execute some queries inside that, or you can configure the firewall. All the resources which you deploy in Azure will have the same kind of process need to follow. So it is going to always take 2 to 5 minutes in the deployment process, and then once it is done, you can use that resource. It will be up and running in this minimum time. So in this lesson, we have seen how we can provision and deploy a relational database service in Azure. We have focused on the different aspects of provisioning, as well as we have also provisioned Azure SQL Database using Azure Portal. As you can see here, the previous demo we have provisioned the database, which is right now deployed, is showing me the deployment is complete. It means my database is successfully deployed and it is ready to use right now. If I click on go to resource, it will take me to that particular database, which is located in East US region. The status of the database is online, and then somewhere I have a proper server name and the configuration selected for the database. I can click on set server firewall kind of option, and I can see that the security configuration of the firewall is done or not. I can see my allow Azure services properties are true. I can also see that my current client IP address is also added and configured inside this database. If I want to add on some more computers, and if I want to configure some more networks and the private IP range into this, I can add those range here, and those computers can also access my database afterwards. Obviously, it's using a double layer authentication, so that IP address has to be added. And then if I want to cross check if I'm able to connect to the database or not, then all I have to do is I have to either connect the server name with my existing servers like SQL Server Management Studio or Visual Studio or any other utility which allows me to connect with SQL Server, and then I can use it.